So you're gearing up for the AZ-305 Azure Architect exam? Well, you've come to the right place. We are going to build a super focused study guide for what is honestly one of the biggest parts of the entire test, designing solutions for identity, governance, and monitoring. Let's get right into it. First things first, why are we zeroing in on this? Because this one single domain makes up a massive chunk of your final score. We're talking 25 to 30%. So yeah, mastering these concepts isn't just a nice to have, it is absolutely crucial if you want to pass. I want you to think of this explainer as your personal roadmap. We're going to break down every single piece, not just as a boring list of services, but from the perspective of a real architect. That way, you'll be ready to tackle those tricky scenario questions with total confidence. All right, our journey begins with the absolute foundation of any secure system, identity. Before any user or any service can do anything in your environment, you have got to answer that one critical question. Who are you? Okay, this slide right here, this is an absolute goldmine for exam questions. You have to know which features live in which premium tier. The exam is going to give you a scenario that screams for conditional access, and you need to know that means recommending at a minimum a P1 license. If they mention things like identity protection or privileged identity management, PIM, your brain should immediately go to P2. Look, modern identity is way beyond just a simple password these days. It's all about layers of security. MFA adds that critical second check. Passwordless methods are even better. They're super resistant to phishing. And then there's conditional access. Think of it as the brains of the operation, the security guard at the front door. It's the if-then logic that looks at who you are, where you are, and what device you're on before it decides to let you in. Listen closely, because this is a big one. If you see an exam question asking about temporary admin rights, or an approval process for high-level permissions, or that magic phrase, just-in-time access, the answer is always privileged identity management. Always. In the real world, having admin accounts active 24/7 is a huge security hole. PIM plugs that hole by making sure powerful permissions are only handed out when they're truly needed and only for as long as they're needed. And this right here, this lays out a classic architectural decision you'll have to make. Managed identities are awesome. They get rid of passwords and secrets in your code, which is a massive security win. For the exam, it's actually pretty simple. Is the identity for just one resource, like a single VM that needs to grab a secret from a key vault? Go with system assigned. Or do you have a whole group of VMs, maybe in a scale set that all need the exact same permissions? That's a job for user assigned. It's a one-to-one versus a one-to-many game. Now, let's clear up a classic point of confusion, external identities, specifically B2B versus B2C. Just remember it this way. B2B, business to business, is all about inviting your partners and vendors into your company's system to collaborate on stuff. B2C, business to consumer, is totally different. That's for when you're building a public-facing app and need a separate place to manage the identities for your actual customers. Okay, so we figured out identity. We know who somebody is. Now it's time to move on to Pillar 2, governance. This is where we tackle the next big question. Okay, you're in. Now what are you actually allowed to do? This hierarchy is basically the backbone of good governance in Azure, and the single most important concept here is inheritance. It's simple. Any rule or permission you apply at a higher level, like a management group, just automatically cascades down to everything underneath it. It's how you enforce standards across your whole organization without going crazy. I want you to think of Azure Policy as the official rulebook for your environment. It's not about who can do things. That's what access control is for. No, policy is about the resources themselves. It's what makes sure that, for example, all your storage accounts have to have encryption turned on, or that nobody can deploy expensive VMs outside of a specific region. This table is basically your cheat sheet for the exam. A question will give you a scenario, and you just have to pick the right tool for the job. Need to flat out prevent something from happening? Use deny. Want to just report on things that are out of compliance without stopping anyone? That's audit. Need to automatically add a required tag? Use append. And what if you need to fix something that's missing, like a monitoring agent? That's what deploy if it exists for. Here's another key distinction they'll test you on: policy versus blueprints. A policy is just a rule, but an Azure Blueprint, well, that's more like the architect stamp. It's a whole package deal. It bundles up policies, role assignments, and even resource templates so you can stamp out a complete, fully governed environment in one go. So policies for rules, blueprints for entire environments. When we talk about resource locks, it's all about picking the right amount of protection. The cannot delete lock is going to be your best friend for production. It stops those oops, I deleted the database moments, but still lets you make necessary changes. The read-only lock, though, is way stricter. You'd only use that for something that absolutely cannot be touched, maybe like an environment that's under a legal hold. So we've locked down identity, we've enforced governance, which brings us to our final pillar, monitoring. This is how we design systems to answer that really important question. What in the world just happened? It's all about getting visibility into the health, performance, and security of our entire setup. Pretty much everything you're going to do in Azure Monitor, whether it's building dashboards or setting up alerts, it's all built on top of two basic kinds of data. And trust me, understanding the difference between metrics and logs is step number one to nailing this part of the exam. And here's the breakdown. Metrics are just numbers, things like CPU percentage or network speed. They're lightweight, they come in fast, and they're perfect for dashboards and simple alerts. They tell you that something is wrong. But logs are the detailed story. They're records of events, like an application error or a specific user sign-in. Logs are what you dig into to find out why something went wrong. So if your logs are this vast ocean of data, then the Coastal Query Language, or KQL, is your high-tech submarine. It's this incredibly powerful language that lets you dive deep into your log analytics workspace to search, filter, and analyze all that data. It's how you do real troubleshooting and security hunting. So how does an alert actually work? Well, first, you define a rule, like, let me know if CPU is over 90% for 5 minutes. When that condition is met, boom, the alert fires. And here's the key part. It triggers an action group. Think of the action group as a separate, reusable recipe for what to do next. Send an email, page the on-call engineer, or maybe even kick off an automation runbook to try and fix the problem. All right, we've walked through all three pillars. Now let's pull it all together into our final exam blueprint. This is where we turn all that knowledge into actual correct answers on the test when the pressure's on. Look, if you only have a few minutes for a last-minute cram session, this is your slide. These are the heavy hitters that map directly to exam questions. Know your Entra ID premium features. Know that PIM means just in time. Remember that governance flows down from management groups. Know which policy effect to use when. And please remember, metrics tell you something's wrong. Logs tell you why. And just as important as knowing what's right is knowing the common traps they'll set for you. Don't get tripped up by these. The exam loves to test if you can tell similar services apart. So don't confuse policy with blueprints. Know when to use system versus user-assigned identities. Remember that a lock on a resource group protects everything inside it. And keep those B2B and B2C scenarios straight in your head. And that is a wrap on our deep dive into identity, governance, and monitoring for the AZ-305. You have the core concepts, you know the scenarios to watch out for, and you know the pitfalls to avoid. You've got the blueprint.